First, the Russian soldiers tried to do it with bayonets, but they found their bayonets were too blunt, so one soldier was sent up to the school kitchen to find a better knife. So there was this kind of ridiculousness amongst the horror.
It's a fantastic piece of reporting, Anthony, but it's a horrible story. You've been hearing a testimony of a 20-year-old builder from a small town in central UK near Kherson. What did he tell you?
He had been captured in a village, in his own village, a village called Novovesenska, in early April. What he described was the torture and murder of prisoners of war, which he had witnessed. But the overarching thing about it was the kind of chaotic, often banality of the whole situation, as 5 Ukrainian soldiers who had been captured were tortured and killed. And it started off with the torturers, a group of Russian soldiers, starting to argue as to who would steal their prisoners' socks, because they noticed the Ukrainian soldiers were wearing quite good thermal socks. And so there's this horrible situation where they start beating these prisoners who have been tied, already bare-chested and quite badly beaten actually when the session started, while arguing about their socks and who was going to steal their socks. And then it kind of degraded from that moment.
And what happened to them?
Well, as the torture continued, I was asking, so this builder had been arrested for reasons he didn't quite understand. He'd been trying to fix a window in a neighbour's house that had been blown out by a shell. The village had been occupied by Russian soldiers. He was arrested on suspicion of communicating information to the Ukrainian army on a phone, but he didn't actually have a phone on him. So he was taken to the basement of the schoolhouse where his hands were tied. Later, a few hours later, the Ukrainian army attacked the village, and that attack was repulsed. 5 of these soldiers were taken prisoners, 5 Ukrainian soldiers. They were beaten, then they were led into the basement where the torture session began. They were badly beaten, then some of them were mutilated by knives, some had their fingers cut off. First, the Russian soldiers tried to do it with bayonets, but they found their bayonets were too blunt, so one soldier was sent up to the school kitchen to find a better knife. So there was this kind of ridiculousness amongst the horror, but also the young builder who told me this, that there was no point in the interrogation. They weren't being asked even anything really coherent to try and have an answer extracted from them. There was just this kind of shambolic frenzy of pain. At one point as well, the soldiers each had their heads held in a pail of water and a kind of improvised waterboarding until they were semi-conscious. And in the end, they were all killed by a pistol.
And were you shocked? How shocked? You've seen some horrible things, Anthony. You've spoken to people who've seen some horrible things in your time. How shocking do you find this?
I'm quite... I've been covering kind of stories a lot, Stig, like this. I covered genocide in Srebrenica. I've seen what it looks like when thousands of men are machine-gunned one on top of the other. So I think why I was working on this story was part of looking at a lot of information related to the treatment of soldiers and the prisoners of war in this conflict by both sides. We know plenty about the war crimes visited upon civilians, largely by Russian soldiers. But I wanted to look at the treatment of what it's like to be a soldier, and if you get captured, what you may face. And certainly the abuse of prisoners occurs by both sides. But the overwhelming brutality against prisoners of war is committed by Russians against Ukrainians, and there's almost a kind of pathological hatred, often without any reason, in the way they treat Ukrainian soldiers once they've captured them.